Ve bugünün son oturumu, zirvemizin son oturumu, İslam politik ekonomisinin dünü, bugünü ve yarını küresel yaklaşım başlıklı oturum olacak. Moderatörümüz Doçent Doktor Erhan Akkaş hocamız. Kendisini huzurlarınıza davet ediyorum. Buyursunlar lütfen. Ve panelistlerimiz Doçent Doktor İsa Yılmaz, Profesör Doktor Alija Avdukic, Doktor Banjaran Surya Indrastomo ve Doktor Salah Alhammadi. Hoş geldiniz. Buyurun.
And welcome you all for this last session. We'll talk about the political economy aspects of Islamic finance sector after a long discussion from the sectorial perspective. I'm not sure that it will be boring or exciting after this all sectorial discussion. Today, it will be global perspective, by the way, from Turkey and European countries, then Asian countries, and finally the Gulf countries. So it will be global perspective. So we have Dr. İsa Yılmaz from Istanbul Medeniyet University. We have Professor Alija Avdukic from Dundee University. Then we have Dr. Banjaran Indrastomo from Indonesia University. And finally, we have Dr. Salah Alhammadi from Arab Open University. Let me start with the Dr. İsa. Dr. İsa, could you please summarize the development of Islamic finance from the political economy perspective to us in around 10 minutes?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Erhan. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I know that you are all got bored, or perhaps not bored, but tired at least. So it's the last session, and I'll do my best to explain my presentation in 10 minutes, or less than 10 minutes, hopefully. So if there are some questions, I don't know, you can answer, but if you have time, then we'll make our best. Okay, my presentation will be about the Islamic finance development in Turkey over the decades. So it will be a kind of different presentation. Why? Because normally from the morning up to now, there were distinguished speakers, and each of them touched upon a certain aspect of Islamic finance. And my point will be something political economy, as the title implies. So what's the political economy of Islamic finance in Turkey? Actually, we should first look at the political and economic developments of Turkish economy for at least 50 years. If you look at the performance of Turkish economy at least 50 years, it means that Islamic finance has become a strategic sector in this field, in Turkish economy. So this is evident itself. And the question why Islamic finance has such strategic importance, the answer is very much related with the political economy. So let me start with the basic one. You know all that the globalization of Islamic finance is like the 1970s. After these, the collapse of Bretton Woods system and the petrodollars, spread of petrodollars over the world from the GCC countries. So Turkey had a great opportunity to bring these petrodollars in the form of Islamic finance capitals into the country. So lots of Islamic banks were established, and they had branches. They opened branches in Turkey, and if you look at the Turkish economy for those times, 1980s, I mean, there is a need for Islamic financial inclusion in the economy. Why? Because Turkey has some politics. This is known as export-led growth strategies, and this strategy needs financial liberalization. So financial liberalization means the free flow of capital from all over the world to the Turkey. Therefore, Islamic finance has a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity for Turkish people. The Turkish economy, and if you look at the population, Turkish population, most of them are Muslim, and the acceptance of Islamic financial system was there, already there. But the political imagination or the objective by the political parties from the 1960s, if you look at this aim, we can see a different picture. What I mean that there was an initial phase that the authorities or the dominant factor in the economy in Turkey in 1960s, when you look at the center, it was mostly secular. And the Muslim entrepreneurship, business and investment, etc., it was on the periphery sides. So it was like the Muslim entrepreneurship was excluded from the system. They had no opportunity to invest in big projects, etc. So Islamic finance from this point was a great opportunity, as I said. 1970s, 1980s, if you look at the political parties who are the ruling parties or the opposition parties as well, you see that the right-wing parties, but these are the conservative parties. I cannot define as Islamic parties, but most of them were conservative and right parties. And these parties, when they become a ruler in the politics, they brought some groups of Muslims from periphery to the center. So 1980s and 1990s, we see that a huge movement from the periphery to the center of the Muslim groups. But these Muslim groups, they are not only the sole individuals. They become, or they like the entrepreneurs, they investors, they had so many companies, etc. So they had some associations. So it means that when we come to the year of 2000 and 2010, for decades, if you look, if we divide them as decades, so we see that after, especially in the 2000s, we see a completely different picture. Why? Because all the Muslim groups from the periphery was included in the center. From one point of view, it was a good news. Why? Muslims are now in the economy, they are operating in the economy, they have great advantages in the economy, and they use Islamic finance to make the industry bigger. So it means that from the perspective of transactional developments, it was a great success, I believe. But from the transformational aspect, which means that if you look at the first principles of Islamic finance, what were the objective of us in the 1970s, 1980s? What was the objective? It was more or less social objective. Yes, economic performance is important, but at the same time, there should be a social performance. So, and we believe when these groups, Muslim groups from the periphery were moved to the center, we should expect that these Muslim groups, they have now opportunity to fulfill our expectations in the form of Islamic finance, institutionalization of Islamic finance, and the practices therefore. But what happened in the reality, we see that there is a great convergence. There is a great convergence towards the mainstream, the replication of the conventional financial instruments. But in the form, it seems like Islamic finance of Islamic finance, but in the substance, the picture is completely different. So, this political economy aspect provides us that something should be done in a different way. It's not the size of the Islamic finance that we should only matter, but also the transformation. So I believe that it is the case of Islamic finance in Turkey. It's more or less top-down approach, meaning that government has certain expectations from Islamic finance field. The governments, different governments from the 1970s up to now, they had different expectations from the Islamic finance, like the capital movement from the Gulf countries, etc., or the satisfying the Muslim voters. That it seems that there are some institutions that were established in this country so that we are becoming more and more Muslim. But in practice, when you look at the civil society side, still, there is no agreement on the Islamic finance that people are investing all of their monies in Islamic banks, etc., etc. No, the discussions are going. So for the future, what we can do, we can expect something different from Islamic financial institutions. Or we cannot squeeze our expectations into Islamic banking. Perhaps non-banking financial institutions, we can expect more so that we can have a social transformation. I think that's enough for the first part.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Isa, for this great timing. So let me move to the European countries from Professor Alija. Could you please summarize the political economy of this Islamic finance in European countries? Maybe you can summarize from the UK in particular. It's up to you. Yeah, please, so, mic is yours.
Of course, trajectory of Islamic finance in the UK or Europe in general is, of course, is different from what Isa was explaining, the transition from the periphery to the center, and then peripheral people start become in the charge of Muslim affairs, which led to the negligence of the cause factor of existent Islamic finance itself, which is quite different when it comes to the Europe, because most of us migrated from the Muslim countries searching for job opportunities and the space in the European context, and therefore the migration is the main cause. But then with the migration there was also emerging needs to facilitate the everyday life of the Muslim in general, and then business people in particular. As a result of that, and of course the main efforts, I would give it credit to the people from the subcontinent, particularly from Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, who through enormous efforts try to convince the world that there is something Islamic, that life could be still organized in that public space using the Islam. And that is after the fall of course, Ottoman Empire, and Islam become locked into the private space or in mosque or home. And no even colonial power will have issues that you will pray and go to the mosque, neither the Europe. But the moment when you start trying to organize the life within the public spheres, then is becoming the issues. This is where you are now challenging the establishments and the systems. And in that moment, so Islamic as a movement, in this case we are talking about Islamic economics or political economy of Islam, started to take the shapes, how we can have the system organized, which is a holistic. And when we are talking about systems, we are referring to the multiple components which are connected to the socioeconomic norms that will make something work. Because if I just halalize the one element of the system, or in this case we are talking about order, because Islam represents the holistic approach or order of life, and you halalize the one element, of course the system will not be able to function. It does not give us expectations that we are looking to see. So in that sense, educational, convincing the people, and we are talking about 1960s, 70s, in the post-colonial period, that there is something Islamic within the division of the world on the, as I say, the Cold War, European, American, and the communist, led to the completely different approach that Islam actually provides a different solution. And when I was studying in Arabic, I found enormous literature which will tell you about how socialism is compliant with Islam. And at the same time, you will find the authors who will try to justify capitalism as a way of organizing the life. But we actually miss to provide where is Islam. And when we are talking about organizing the life, whether it's in East or the West, doesn't matter, we are really referring to the most of the production. We all know when I say the capitalism, what does it mean? That somebody who has a capital, who provides the money, he or she will take the alpha. They will determine what workers will get, what the land or actually the rent will be given. And we know that is the capitalism very clearly. And in the socialist society, as being from Bosnia, which was a communist, and the socialism was a dominant, I remember, even I was a child, that every single product will have a price because the labor will define what you will get. So there is no capital incentives to invest in those societies. But then the question is how we can produce our own system, which when I say Islamic, I actually referring to something clear-cut which defines Islamic from the others, capitalism or socialism in that sense. And I think this is the big picture or theory from where I would like to start. So people from the subcontinent in the European context try through the educational systems. So we have in 90s, 80s, 90s, Market Institute of Higher Education or Islamic Foundation, which provides the initial developments and the theory, and was purely based on economics issues, behavioral patterns of the people, how to bring us together. But then expanded from the Markfield to Durham to even Scotland and other places, so that the spread of intellectual development in terms of what should be Islamic economy. And I think this is the unique stance of the European approach to Islamic economy, because in most of the countries the starting point was usually through the fiqh and development of Islamic studies to provide new areas or new avenues of understanding the life. In terms of education, I know I will rush it. In terms of institutional development, of course, in 2004, as on the back of educational seminars, we have seen establishment of Islamic Bank of Britain. And of course, it was not successful. We know the issues, because I worked for 1 year in Islamic Bank of Britain, and I can tell you that the maximum that we managed to reach is 60,000 customers, even though potential is probably 2 million or even more. But why not? Why people never associated themselves with Islamic banks in Britain? Because they did not recognize that uniqueness, because they say this is the same things. I'm just using for paying for payment system, so I don't see the need to be part of that. And therefore also it implies that when we thought that Islamic finance is going down, then we start to see in the fintech companies, and the previous speakers, they elaborated, but they still don't find that customer base within the fintechs. They are not coming. Perhaps the most successful part of development of institutionalization of Islam and providing it in the public space was through the charity sector, or what we call it third sector, zakat and waqf. Perhaps they are more successful than private sector, in a way that in the UK, as per 2018, we have 3,000 Muslim charities. Some of them turnover goes around 170 million, like Islamic Relief. But totally, they turn over much the total assets and liabilities of Islamic banking in the UK, which is, until recently, were even ahead of the Turkey in terms of the size. So this tells you the magnitude that money is fluctuating in the charity or the third sector. And it was primarily focused on there is a relief, crying for help, wherever it is happening in Afghanistan, Syria, or wherever. But then there is no fundamental shift towards the waqf, because instead of depending on the community, they realize how we can become more sustainable in a sense to provide the financial support to the people in the need. So, and then the government, of course, plays the very important role. It is important to have constantly cash flow from the Gulf countries, of course. Petrodollar is important in this segment, and that's why we have first sovereign sukuk in the UK in 2015, comparing before many of the even Muslim nation states, which provides you the one kind of holistic understanding, the discourse of developments of Islamic finance, starting with economic theories, which is uncompleted project, unfortunately, then Islamic banking and finance, which took the lead in the Western world, and then also engagement of the government. There are now the new avenues that we are entering. One of them is a student loan. It's a big issue. The education among the Muslims is a big problem. Muslims reach around 22% higher education level of full first year of university, whereas at the same time Sikhs and Hindus go to even 49. One of the reasons for that is fatwas that say student loan is haram, but you don't have a solution. You just provide a value statement, and hence there is nothing forward to come and resolve it. And on back of that, there is an approach now to create Sharia compliant student loan using the takaful model. Another one is a pension again. This is another big issue that we are facing in the Western world. Muslims do not subscribe to the pensions, and it's a huge under performance, and particularly sustaining the Muslim community in the old age is becoming the big issues. We work on the paper, what is the behavioral patterns, why Muslims do not subscribe. It's not even the knowledge of Sharia, because there is issues, because you have defined contribution, but you don't have defined benefit, which creates the kind of gharar issues and speculation. But it's all behavioral postulates that, you know, as a Muslims, you know, we don't know whether we will reach to the age that we will benefit from the pension. So let's take it now whatever we can. So it's still probably even educational elements, despite availability of sources, that is missing within the European context in the knowledge. And I don't think so it's much better in the rest of the world. So I think these are the just main factors that determining the space and what is happening within the European context when it comes to the development of political economy, values and ethics, which shapes the institutional perception. And on the top of that, and I will finish it, something that actually drives current innovation, and we can see much more progression, is the ethics of halal. 40, 50 years when the first Muslim came, they were obsessed of having the fiqhi solutions for their needs, meat, food, and other things. But now it's going beyond. It's more entering into the type expectations. What are the more ethical norms that will apply probably to wider community, not only to Muslims, that they will like or they would like to associate themselves with a halal label. And that's probably gives you the quick summary what's happening within the UK. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So it is also second great timing. So I'm expecting from the Dr. Banjaran from this performance too. So now let me move to Asian countries from the European countries. So the Banjaran, can you give us a summarize from the Asian perspective in terms of political economy of Islamic finance?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Erhan. If I have to fill these gaps on explaining what's going on in Asia, of course, the image of Malaysia is there within Islamic finance, knowing that at least from 21% of the market shares of Islamic finance within Asia Pacific, dominantly is the Malaysian story. But I want to bring you the perspective of Indonesia here, because when we talk about the story of Indonesia here, there's actually a dotted line that we can draw from the Turkish story, the European story to the Indonesian story. The dotted line was, even when everyone's teaching Islamic economic and finance, the first principle that they want to uphold is social justice, right? Social justice in a sense that if prior to having an independent state in the Muslim countries, previously they are occupied, then afterward they were left with the fact that they had to organize their society, manage their government, doing the redistribution. The image of being just in the society sort of like passed through once the nation was established. Within Indonesian case, we see that the fulfillments of the social justice was there in the presence of making sure that the distribution was actually, redistribution process was actually taken care of. So if you are talking about Islamic finance as a financialization's way or moving capital, we didn't see that story in Indonesia. In the 60s, 70s, even when we have this oil income surplus in the Middle East, we are also producing oils. I think I remember up until 1998, we produced 1.6 million barrels per day. But in that case, there hasn't been much of a story of Islamic finance as a driver of growth in Indonesian story. Instead, Islamic finance was more on the very side, talking about access to capital to the SMEs, talking about how then the forms of not only banking, but there is also an alternative forms like cooperation. I mean, if you are reading most of this literature on Islamic finance in Indonesia, you always have this image of bottom-up stories, civil society engagement, where in fact at this point in times there are at least 1,000, some numbers calls 5,000, what we call with BMTs, Islamic cooperative, acting like a financing house, where the wealth of the members is actually circulating within the members itself. And that's what Islamic finance was fulfilling in Indonesia. We had Islamic banking is quite later, 1992, 1991, 1992 was the first. And then, well, only one Islamic banks for like 10 years, oh no, 6 years, till 1999. Then the story was that we are just 5%. So it hasn't been in the image of Indonesia, Islamic banking as the, what we call the center of it. It has always been Islamic finance as a way in which redistribution is kind of like working in place. Similar to what Professor Alija was mentioning, social finance was big in Indonesia. We have plenty of this. We don't call it a third industry like philanthropy. We just call it like the zakat institution. But interestingly, the powerful zakat institution in Indonesia is privately organized rather than state. So it gives you a bit of image that within Indonesian story, it's civil society that's actually pushing forward. Now, if I want to put a comparison between Indonesia and Malaysia, the Malaysian case is pretty much what Isa has been referring to with the Turkish case, you know, top down. There is always a need for governments seeing Islamic finance as a way in which they can actually propel the growth. But in Indonesian case, it's never been there. It quite recently, yes. Quite recently, in the last 20 years, at least from 2004, the government see Islamic financial product within capital market as a means to mobilize capital in. Now, 26% of government bond is actually in the form of sukuk. And they had a policy for fulfilling current account deficit. 19% of the yearly issuance is in the form of sukuk. Indonesia now is the largest issuance of sovereign sukuk. And because in that things, even the government see it as a way to mobilize it. Now, coming back to where it leads to, of course, recently there is actually quite of an interest within the center, if you call it, within the government to move along with Islamic finance. But of course, you know, the idea was Islamic banking in the front, increasing the market share. But again, if you are following the discussion from earlier today, in a country where the market share is less than 10%, the battle was about the growth of the financing itself. It has to go more than the conventional. So this kind of battle was something that we see in Indonesian case, and perhaps will sort of like determine the flavor of which the Islamic finance development will take place. So there is something coming from the bottom, where the idea was cooperative redistribution, helping the society, and there is also an attempt from the center to mobilize capital. If you ask me where it ends to be honest, we are still seeing the integration has been pushed forward, but we haven't seen the result itself. But all in all, if you ask me again, what kind of story with Indonesia have, it's a very authentic one. Much more haven't been explored, and perhaps if those of you are doing research in Islamic finance, keen to explore more Indonesian case, it will bring some of these idea of innovation, getting things done, bringing things to work that suit into the context of the society within the norms and cultural capital of Islam, to bring again solution to the that's being faced by the society, the community, the country itself, even the Muslim nation. And I guess I end up in there so that we can actually follow up this discussion toward top-down, bottom-up, as well as how Islam is being localized in different contexts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Banjaran, for this great timing again. So let me move to the GCC countries, which is the leading region of this Islamic finance sector. So the mic is yours, Dr. Salah.
Thank you, Dr. Erhan. Good evening, everyone. It's been a long day for you. I know you guys heard good morning, good afternoon, and now you're hearing good evening. Hopefully we don't hear good night. Well, I'll be talking about the overall, political economy on the GCC and how the Islamic finance could help. Actually, it is helping to diversify away from, sadly to say that, but we have to diversify away from oil. And the reason is, as we know that, as Dr. Isa was saying, that historically the GCC is been depending on oil as a sort of I would say, main source of income. However, with the crisis, recent crises like COVID-19 and before that in 2008, problem happens. When the oil price comes down, then this is create a sort of a pressure on the budget for the government to do any extra fiscal policy and do more infrastructure or use any project. But if we go a bit back, even if a lot of books talks about the petrodollars in the 70s because of where King Faisal boycotted the oil to the U.S. and made chaos on the price of oil. Oil has been discovered in the 30s, even before that. But because of the war, the Second World War II, when England was part of it, so it's what put in halt. But the first shipment in Kuwait was in 1936. So the money, it wasn't only recently in the 70s, it was there, but because of the modernization and all these things that we see in the media, and the crisis that happens in the 70s created a big wealth for especially the GCC, or I shouldn't say that just the GCC, because any oil producer had that effect as well, including Russia and Venezuela at that time. However, with the nowadays, technology could go both ways. If you think of what happened in the Great Depression, it took a long time to get affected, and the reason because news to reach, like from Denver to New York, it takes a month to be reacted. If you go with events, like in the stock market, now I'm here, I know what's going on in New York, so the events right on the spot. That's what happened in crisis, like in the 2008 or COVID-19, everybody knows what's going on, so oil price automatically shut down. And this again puts pressure on the oil prices and oil income for the GCC. That's what makes the government wanted to diversify away from just the one main source of income. And they have, of course, they have succeeded. They have planned to create more income for their citizen, or the Muslim world, I should say. For example, if we look at in 2019, the UAE government has indulged or involved the Islamic finance in many ways. And we have to believe something. If the Western want us to be clean energy, we will be clean energy. They fed us about sustainability. Wow, everybody's talking about sustainability. And now, if we think about it, about, you know, the oil, and they say the oil is in the hand of, you know, the Muslim society, let's say. If they try to do an alternative, then it's going to be at a higher price to them. So what can we do to make these people buy our policy? Because that's what political economy does. Well, let's make it a clean energy. Societal, you know, make it as environmental issue. Because everybody gets scared, and now we have to do something away, be a part of it. Because they have tried to do alternative than the oil, and it's cost a lot. And people were not going to buy this unless we put a big element, you know, in that issue. And this is great things about the political economy, which is fine. Now, if we go back about the alternative, you know, Islamic finance was a huge part of the alternative in the GCC. For example, sukuk was introduced as a green sukuk. Of course, sukuk was introduced before, but as if we go with the you know, propaganda of clean energy, and we have to be you know, following the standards of the United Nations. Green sukuk was used in the UAE, and I believe they have used it in many different ways. They said by the 2050, 75% of their energy will be cleaned energy. And of course, the green sukuk was used to finance certain you know, infrastructure. All has to be clean since it's a green sukuk. And then, I don't know if you guys heard that, but they have also introduced a blue ocean or blue sukuk. I don't know how many color we're going to go, but that's the green sukuk now is taking part of it. In Saudi Arabia, they have done Scania infrastructure with the green sukuk. It was financed. It's a great, you know, 50% of the energy is from, you know, the green sukuk. NEOM, I'm sure some of you heard about it. You know, NEOM is a huge project in the desert in Saudi Arabia. It's going to be, you know, very complicated, sophisticated, great project that is going to bring innovation, technology, increase. It's going to be 100% renewable energy. So nothing with the oil, nothing with the stuff that has to deal with the oil itself. And also waqf and zakat is a great pillar of Islam. Has been used from the Islamic finance to sort of diverse and use it in the political economy. For example, in Kuwait, we have huge waqf funds that's been used for healthcare, for education. Like, for example, in the Arab Open University, we have 16 fund. That's all from, you know, waqf funds that are supporting scholarships for the student who cannot, you know, pay or be as a student. Also, we have the zakat. I will end up with that. Zakat fund is a great thing that's been used for refinancing for people who's underrepresented to buy housing, and being used in that term. I guess Dr. Erhan is looking at me, so I'll stop here and won't be any longer. Thank you.
I'll back to you for another 5 minutes. So thank you, Dr. Salah. Now we consumed our 10 minutes for each. Now we are passing to our 5 minutes for each. So I have a question to Dr. Isa. Dr. Isa, you mentioned top-down process. But, you know, is there any demand from the civil society to the policymakers? I mean that, is there any bottom-up process too? What do you think about this issue? Yes.
Okay, thank you. Actually, in Turkey, the case is quite different, as explained by the GCC countries and the UK. UK has its own, you know, history about the Islamic finance. And Indonesia is the ideal. So, as explained by Dr. Banjaran, seems to be ideal. In Turkey, there had always been a bottom-up demand for Islamic finance, but not in the form of, you know, quote-unquote Islamic finance, because there are partnerships that Muslims wanted to build among themselves, like the cases, the Turkish people, I think, in this place, they'll remember the Yimpaş, Kombasan, İhlas Finance, etc. These cases are quite well known, but the problem here is that they made some partnership between themselves, but the result was mostly failure. So Islamic finance, you know, in terms of these experiences, was a negative sign for those people who are Muslim who want to build a new partnership with themselves, etc. So I can say that they lost the trust. The Muslims, they lost the trust between themselves in the side, you know, in the field of civil society. The question is whether Islamic finance can rebuild this trust among Muslims, Muslim entrepreneurship in Turkey. So the case seems that we are moving, you know, a heavy financialization, which means that highly speculative fields and yes, partnership, but these partnerships based on not in the real economy side, but on the financial side. So the risk is high, etc. To minimize the risks, banks take their cautions, as I said, to minimize the risk. So what happens, yes, there are some new developments in the field of civil society. We observe them, we experience them, perhaps we become part of it, but it's not a constructed and established, or I can say an institutionalized form, institutionalized form. So that's the problem, I guess. Yes, I can say the answer. Perhaps my opinion is that yes, there had always been a bottom-up demand for it, but the pressure comes from the top. Means that they, you know, the general idea is that the Islamic finance in Turkey is not the Islamic finance. It's a participatory finance. The term is better, seems better to us. So participation, no, not banking, but participation finance. It seems like quite different, you know, it comes from a different world to us. I think that we can break this, you know, a top-down process, top-down enforcement to us, and we can build new institutionalized forms of Islamic finance. We can say something else, perhaps, a finance, you know, an Islamic values-oriented finance system, perhaps, so that we can move from another side, and we don't have to become part and parcel of the global financial system. Yes, we should, this can be the aim, but not the financialized aspect of financial system. Perhaps we should emphasize the role of real economy sides. As we know from the last crisis, 2008 crisis, we know that the economies, in all around the world, they are more prone to the crisis, and they are calling back to these real economy financing issues. So we have already our theoretical, you know, backgrounds. So the problem is that how we can realize this, how we can form different institutions under this Islamic finance sector.
Okay, thank you for your answer. So I have a question to Professor Alija. Alija, the UK is a leader in Islamic finance among the European countries. So I really wonder that what is the main motivation behind these developments over the years? Can you give a specific example from the academia sector or something else? So, do you have any specific examples for this?
I mean, just let's start from the micro level. Why is the success? Why is not Islamic finance successful, guys, in Germany, for example? The dominant nations or migrations is Turkey and Bosnia. We know that. But we didn't develop Islamic finance. We actually did not even we didn't even lay the foundations to have it. So why it happened in the UK is the questions to ask. Probably this is the better I will phrase. And I think the main reason is that both of Turkey and Bosnia, in Austria and Germany, are very much related to secular understanding of the world, and Islam is very much locked in the private and the mosque space. Whereas in the subcontinent, they did not went through the secularization period that we suffer in a way, and hence you find Islam is still active and presented more in the public life than in other places. That's my, just from the micro, ordinary people expectations. Why you will find in London, you know, the Islam is visible in much more, in many public spaces more than in Germany or Austria, despite that in Austria Islam is recognized by state, but you don't see the Islamic values or representation of Islam in many places. So the UK from very much micro level is the people's demand approach to finance. So that we can actually correlate with Indonesia, that most of the developments that we have witnessed actually emerge from the communities. But then also there is a government part which actually positively engaged and much earlier than the many Muslim nation states. So that's why you find that kind of support. They are actually constantly testing what's happening. It is interesting that you have engagement of government to provide you Sharia loans for the students. Just to see, oh, there is a backwardness of the Muslim in terms of education. What is the reason? Oh, they are not accepting the conventional norms, and hence there is immediate response to catch up, to provide a solution. Similarly, it is in the pension. And that's the fundamental reason of the development of Islamic Bank in Britain in 2004. Now, if you are looking across the many Muslim nation states within the MENA region, they probably introduced Islamic finance in 2012, 15, even later. So this is probably the interest to see and try something new. It is quite well or common within the Western world. So everything new will be easily adopted, and it is much faster than other places. And if I just compare the UK and Germany, because I go quite often, I can see always, despite that the Germany is quite developed in the sense, but you can see that certain things will always come later, 1 year or 2 years later, but already become norms and we get used to it in the UK. So now that is a one side from the just micro level, civil society's interest in Islamic finance and the nature of the people which are driving that development, but at the same time positive response from different governments, whether it was Labour and Conservative, so they could see their own benefit and interest. But also interestingly that in terms of education, the earliest master programs, I don't know when was the first MSc Islamic Finance in Turkey is introduced, but we can track it back in 2004 in the UK, the earliest master, which was provided through Loughborough University, which is one of the Russell Group top university in the United Kingdom. So you can see the education and development also follow that. And of course, before that, we have a numbers of conferences that used to take the place in organization with Islamic Development Bank and Islamic Foundation, which provide in even 80s, the first publication. Perhaps these are the elements which were crucial that Islamic finance spread substantially within the UK context, but also I think the presence of both top-down and bottom-up approach, top-down from the people, micro-level interest into Islamic values, and that we can see in quite successful sector of the philanthropy, zakat, and waqf, less successful banking because institutionalization itself as a process did not give the fruits because people do not associate, did not recognize what they were expecting to see. And there's also one, and I will end up, I know the timing is issue. There are many mainstream universities which provides the Islamic education, ilahiyat, Islamic studies. But Muslim people will unlikely send their children to study in Edinburgh. There is a Center for Islamic Studies, but no Muslim kids will like to go. They will prefer to go something called Darul Ulooms, which are the Muslim seminaries. They are not recognized by the government. Just in Lancaster, I saw 7,000 girls studying in those institutions. They are not recognized, and the only scholars or alim will be accepted if you come from those, because they still believe that the classical hardcore Islamic values are provided within those settings instead of going to the mainstream education where there is a still fear of Orientalist approach to Islamic studies. And that's one of the issues that is still commonly problematic. So who is providing that? And I can see that success of Dundee, where I am, is association with Al Maktoum College, which is from the Dubai, but there is still gives guarantee that this is not Orientalist approach to Islamic economics and finance either. So there is a constant tension and the fear, particularly among the native or home students within the Muslim community. And with that, I will stop.
Okay, thank you for your great answer and detailed answer. So, the Banjaran, I have another question to you. So, as we all know, Malaysia is a leading country in Islamic finance in Asian countries, all over the world, by the way. So, can you give us, of course, you mentioned about this comparison, but can you give us more detail about the political economic differences between Malaysia and Indonesia? Just more detail about that.
I guess beside the one that I was mentioning, that Malaysia is more top-down and Indonesia is more bottom-up. If you look into the histories of institutionalization of Islamic finance in Malaysia, it started in 1963 with Tabung Haji. The way I perceive the Malaysian story, it's pretty much the identity. I mean, if you look into the numbers, yes, Malaysia seems to be like a Muslim country, very pious, religious, but in terms of population division, the Muslim itself is not 80%, it's not 90%, somewhere in the neighborhood 60 to 70%, or even 50%. The rest are Chinese and Indian. I mean, in Malaysian context, from the beginning, the government itself, the ruling government, has the kind of approach of protecting the so-called indigenous Malaysian, which they called as locals. So the way I perceive Islamic finance and the way that Islamic finance being perceived is actually to preserve the Muslim identity within so-called the majority, which is the ruling one. So the protection is there, and using Islamic finance as a mode to unite as well as mobilize capital is there, because the Malaysian story is quite similar to oil in, the story when it got big, similar to oil income surplus period within the Middle East. Now, in Indonesian context, we've been Muslim dominant for, as far as I remember, 85%, 86%, but that kind of preservations of identity was not there. The Muslim identity within Indonesia is quite not, I wouldn't say fractions, but more diversified, more heterogeneous. So in terms of the articulation of Islamic finance itself, it's also heterogeneous. When I trace back the history of Islamic finance articulation and institutionalization in Indonesia, for instance, I very much see that it becomes a bit of hype in 83s, pretty much because of those circles of halakah that moves forward. So, modernization is somewhat brings that Islamic finance alive. But interestingly, it's not Islamic modernity that brings Islamic finance alive, but rather the idea that Islam can provide solution, just like modernity can provide solution to backwardization, is there. The only things that works within Indonesia, unfortunately, was actually education, when that Islam and modern education can assimilate. But in terms of economic, it was. Now, if you fast forward to the present time, Malaysia has been pretty much accommodating the business and Islamic finance application by opening rooms for it to innovate, pretty much with a less, how to say, strict ideas. But Indonesia itself, from the beginning up until now, if those who study Islamic finance, commodity murabaha hasn't been applied in Indonesia. If you look into comparisons of contract, even within Islamic banks, musyarakah is actually above murabaha. Now, those idea of authentic, ideal Islamic finance is still being preserved, but the question is, of course, if you want to go big, how can you work with that kind of model? Yeah. I mean, previous session, it was mentioned that in Islam we don't need finance, we just need a way in which we circulate capitals in more fluent way. But in modern ways, even with the help of technology, the trust of those who push the button is not there. Now, moving forward, if you look into Malaysian case, now they are becoming very stricter, especially following some of the recent development, IOV standard 59, IOV standard 62s, they do not allow sale of that anymore, and it made some of the sukuk illiquid in Malaysia. In Indonesian case, it's the other way around. I've been dealing with certain requests to accommodate commodity murabah application, and interestingly, the Ulama Council already approved, but the Financial Service Authority blocked it because it's against authentic nations of Islamic finance. So the mixture was there, the complexity was there, and I actually, next week, we will be having a new president, and it's actually the first president that put Islamic economic finance and halal within the priority program. If you ask me again next week, I perhaps have a different answer. So let's invite me again. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Banjaran, for this. We will see what's happening the next week. You will explain. So we are at our last session, last speaker and last question of this summit. So if we are talking about Islamic finance, of course, we should have to talk about Gulf countries, Gulf capital. So that's why we have a guest from the Gulf countries. So in this case, we have to talk about oil price and global impact. So my question is that, Dr. Salah, how has the political economy of the GCC countries impacted the global development of Islamic finance? I know you can write a full paper for this question, but we have lost, only 3 minutes.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, I'm not going to take long. I know it's a long day for you and us. We already passed and we got the ticket says ended up. Well, if we look at the Islamic finance, when did it really started? People talk about how it started differently. The originality of Islamic finance could go back to Khalifa and talk about the, the house of finance and all that stuff. But we're not going to go that far. Think of what happened in 1969 when the foreign minister got into Morocco and they met because of the burning of Al-Aqsa. And from there, they decided to initiate the IDB, which is the Islamic Development Bank. So why was it created back then? It's not just because the Gulf or I would say the Islamic country has money, but there's a need because the term of market is changed. Market is not the same as what it used to be before. It's not a dealing. You cannot, with the complicated of the market transaction, especially going globalization, it's not like you have a carpet to sell to an end user and that's it. No, there is a whole complicated way of even financing, transactional cost, all this involved with it. With the nowadays, with the the oil prices going up and down, definitely you have to have a backup plan where you have to diversify your income, just like us. If I am working in one single job and that job is not enough for me, one day is good, one day is not that paying good, then I have to find an alternative solution. And this is what the diversification come in, and that's what the Islamic finance has to stand up with its tools, regardless of, think in 1975, when they created the IDB, what was the question to them? Should we make it a Sharia compliant or Sharia based? And the answer was Sharia compliance, because there's no way you can have it Sharia based with this complication. So the same thing with the diversification in the oil term. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salah. And now we are closing the session. So thank you for your patience and thank you for your coming and supporting this session. Thank you.